is Cleats Off the Couch, another episode here with your host, Del Curry. And today we have a special guest, a friend, another friend. I know I say that like every episode now, but that's where it starts. You start with talking about these things with your friends and people you know, and maybe it builds from there. Guys, if you've been enjoying the different content that's been happening, especially with guests, in order to be able to continue to do this, I would encourage you to check out the Patreon in the link. You can go to the Linktree/CleatsOffTheCouch. Different membership options. There's different perks that come with each membership tier, different ways to be able to support, as well as for you to get bonus content and to see things early, to get sneak peeks, you name it, as well as you support the content and what I am able to do in making this happen. Or if you're somebody who wants to support this kind of content to see that it reaches out and it reaches different people who are football fans and who need to hear about things of faith, whatever it may be, check out the Patreon. That's a number one way to be able to support. And I truly appreciate even those of you who just listen and aren't able to support in any way, shape, or form. Thank you. And to those of you who do support, different patrons, different tippers, whatever it may be, thank you as well. You guys are a huge part of what makes Cleats Off the Couch happen, and I look forward to what else we can make happen moving forward. Having some conversation today about one of my least favorite topics right now in football today. In episode 12, I think it was, check it out. The top 5 reasons why the GOAT doesn't exist. So today, my friend here, he is a Tom Brady fan. He's followed him from New England down to the Buccaneers. He's at least honest about that, which I appreciate. Can't stand people who just all of a sudden start donning the apparel of the team because, I've always been a fan. No, he is not. He has not always been a fan of that team, but he has been a fan of Tom Brady. So I at least respect that. Welcome in, everybody. This is Aaron Gilmore. Welcome in, Aaron. Good to have you today.
Hey, over here. Good to see you.
So tell me a little bit. I mean, that's the place to start. I bring in such an introduction for you. I make you feel so special, like I really want you here. And and so tell me a little bit about how your interest first came into being, because I say you're a fan of Tom Brady. How did you first get connected into football with that? Was it because of Tom? Was it because of the Patriots and where you're living now, or what?
Yeah, so growing up, I used to watch my dad watch football a lot, and it was a kind of a way of him escaping of sorts. And I tried sitting down with him for a couple of years. And again, this is before I even started getting into football, but mainly because I wanted to sit down with my dad and see what it was that excited him every week. And I could not get into the game. I didn't understand the plays. I didn't understand why so many people were on the team. I didn't understand why those people left and then the defense came back on. I didn't understand what is a special teams. And immediately I thought at the time that special teams meant that they were abled. They were disabled. I really did. Yes, because I was a kid. I was like, when we were looking at Special Olympics in that day. So he says, "Oh, this is special teams." It's like, oh, so I get. Oh, okay. So there's a place in football where you have not so abled people coming on to the field to shine. Okay, cool. It was that's how far my ignorance went.
One could argue that's actually where different people actually became disabled. But anyway, that's a different conversation about special teams versus offense and defense. Anyway.
Rough the kicker for sure. Yeah, you get disabled immediately. But no, so that's how far. But that's just an illustration of how far my ignorance really went. And then we moved to Maine, and my now father-in-law was sitting down, and he was watching football with my dad, and it became a guy's day rather than just my dad alone. I was like, okay, so there's something to this. So I gave it an honest look. I sat down and started watching the game, and I was not afraid, although I was a little timid about asking questions in the midst of. So my dad was actually in one of the rarest moods, a teaching moment, and so I sat down. I said, okay, how many players are on the team and why? And so I asked questions, and I started really getting interested in. Oh, that's how the game's played, and then I found myself compelled to jump up and scream and celebrate when I started seeing. Oh, because I now know the rules of the game. And that kind of goes along with the conversation that I had with our youth about worldview, but that's a side note. It's but anyway, so I got into football watching in 2001. This is when I first started watching football, and I was in the living room in Maine. We moved to Maine, and of course, everyone in Maine are their Patriot fans. And I watched in 2001 as Bledsoe hit the field, and I saw how the game was being played, and it was really cool. And then at game 11, he got taken out. and Brady took the field. And the moment Brady took the field, Bledsoe saw the field, I think, one more time, and it was for a short period. Brady, from then on in, was the Patriot quarterback, and so I started becoming a fan, watching him. I started studying his moves, studying his character off the field, and I started becoming really attracted to the man Tom Brady more than, and not just the player himself. And players went to the Patriots over time, and I became fans of the various different players that played for the Patriots. But Brady was the only consistent in
Mm.
all of that, and it was really cool to see how he interacted with all the players that came into the team. So that's how I got started in football. That's how I got started with Brady.
Okay, so it was Brady. It wasn't with a team
It
and
was
then
Brady.
connected into Brady. Okay.
I was a
Okay.
Patriots fan. But really Brady was my biggest fandom.
Gotcha. And I don't want to take up too much of our time today because I know that you and I can get going crazy about this. I encourage anybody listening, if you haven't listened, I think it was episode 12 about the GOAT. Go check that out, give that a listen, and give me your feedback, give me your thoughts. I'm always open to hearing what other people think about it. But I feel like part of the reason why you were more okay with then following Brady after starting potentially as a New England fan who then really connected with this quarterback was, at least according to different conversations we've had, you're not as big a fan of Bill Belichick, it seems.
No, so yes and no. So Bill Belichick is a good coach. He is a good coach, but I was not a fan of a lot of the decisions that he made. Some of the things. So he micromanages, I think, a little too much.
Mm,
And so Brady and others, not just Brady himself. So this is not a, I think Brady should have had his moment. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of members of the team that conveyed the same kind of frustration with this sort of inability to grow, this inability to really see what they were made of. And instead, what Belichick seems to do in his when it comes to his, especially with his offense, he gives them sort of limitations by having them follow rules. Like he kind of keeps them in a box, so to speak. Doesn't really let them kind of be creative and on their own. When Brady went to the Bucks, you saw a vast difference in coaching styles. Belichick was very micromanaging, but Arians, on the other hand, said, "Yep, go ahead, do what you want to do. See what you can come up with." And they tested it, and they went back and forth, and they ended up coming with a really really good offense that ended up winning the Super Bowl the first year after Brady had left the Patriots into that year. So I don't like I don't necessarily like Belichick's style of coaching because there's like I said, a limitation of character and a limitation of an ability for his team members to collaborate and partake into the team. They don't have the same kind of investment. And there's other decisions that came along with why I'm not really a fan of Belichick. I respect him greatly, but the final straw for me was when Brady did leave, and that decision that came, the reasons why that came. Brady wanted to retire with the Patriots, as we'll talk about here later on, because obviously there's new news on that. But Brady wanted to retire with the Patriots, and the rule, the common comment was, well, you're old. We don't know that you can actually stand longer than a year's to year contract, so we'll just go year by year. And Brady says, you know what, forget this. I've been taking pay cuts every year, just about every year. I've been coaching. I've been trying to get the right players on the team. I'm willing to make sacrifices. I've been doing that year in year out to get the right people on the team, which is one of the reasons why I think he's the GOAT, to be honest. Well, one of the reasons anyway. And he ended up leaving because they didn't seem to have the right kind of aptitude or what do you call it, appraisal of his real potential. So
mm,
they let him go because it's a business, and I get it. From a business standpoint, it makes total sense. But from a character standpoint, and even Kraft said the same thing, is this may not have been the right decision to make, and so Brady left for obvious reasons, and we'll talk about this later on. But he might be going back, he might not be. We don't know yet, but
I
so good.
actually, we will have to talk about this because I'll be honest with you, I have not seen this news that you speak of. So, and I'm not sure for those listening to this, we're recording this beginning of December. So, who knows what could happen by then? But it's funny. It's really funny to hear perspective from different people because I'm somebody who some of the things that you said are actually reasons why I appreciate what happened with the New England franchise and with different things there. I'm looking at it from a coaching perspective and some other different pieces, and so like I appreciate some of the things that you didn't really appreciate, which is really interesting to be able to hear because for me there's some pieces from the coach and from the GM and from the front office that are so important, and same with the Buccaneers is that it really does annoy me when people don't take into consideration the fullness of what it looks like to take a team to win a Super Bowl. My one buddy says it very, very well in the way that he really believes there's really 3 or 4 pieces that have to be in place to be able to win a Super Bowl. You have to have a good coach. You have to have a great front office. You have to have a great front office to put those pieces together. You have to have a good defense, and you have to have a good quarterback. Like
Yeah.
those are like the pieces. And if you're missing one of those, it's really hard, not impossible, right? But it's really hard to win a Super Bowl. And one of the things I think, and I kept saying this all that year I shouldn't say all that year, the second half of that season, as you really saw, because I would argue that Bruce Arians actually, how he handled things with how he ran his offense was trash the first 7 weeks of that year. And you can go back and see, because the way that Tom had been shaped, again, and this is part of my argument for why I think Bill was so good and helped to shape Tom into who he has become, is because he saw the formula that was necessary to help shape him into who he needed to be, with a certain style of system that allowed, like, in 3 seconds he's there, in 2 seconds he's crossing from here to here, like being able to identify those pieces to then strategize against what the defense is doing or going to be doing, where it was so key. When he went to Arians' offense, it was Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and just throw in my general area and we'll see what happens. Like it was so undisciplined. And then we saw, coming out of the bye week that year, we saw a completely different offense, because we saw the disciplined offense and the disciplined feel that we had experienced for so many years in New England. And so I see a culmination from the two of them that then took place then because it works. Like, that's nothing against Tom. It's nothing against Bill. It worked. It won how many Super Bowls? You know what I mean? So
Right.
with that,
I agree. No, I agree with what you're saying there. So there's a couple things I want to address with what you just said, though. So because you're right, Brady did not just take himself. No one. I was never claiming, and I never will claim, that Brady made it himself. Like he didn't get there by himself. Belichick gave him a lot of great tools and discipline. I agree with you that while Belichick does tend to micromanage his team, he also highly disciplines them. I mean, it's one of the most disciplined teams that I know of in the NFL. It's quite a feat to watch. And you're right. When he did go to the Bucs, I agree that there was a lack of discipline and just throw to my general area thing. So Brady was able to bring that into the team that they probably never had experienced before. But I do take a small issue with the idea that Belichick made Brady who he is as well. And I know that's not necessarily what you said at its extension. But if that were true, then how would we explain Mac Jones? Brady was on the team maybe a year, maybe 2 years before Belichick put him on the field, and then Brady, I mean, the rest is history. 19 years. But he's had Mac Jones for how long? So Mac Jones doesn't have what Brady had. So Belichick can't use Mac Jones the way that he used Brady. Right? So I think there's kind of a catch-22. You need both of them. Yes. And the reason why Brady was that is one of those GOATs is because he was usable by Belichick's standards and methods. Mac Jones doesn't seem to be.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I would agree that I think a better term in my quick shoot through that statement it would be to say shaped. He helped to shape Brady, because you see who Brady was when he came out of Michigan, and you see how he helped to shape him into who he is. Now, obviously, you have to have some of those intangibles and some of those pieces to be shaped, right? You have to be made of clay to be shaped into a clay pot, right? So right. Like I agree, and I think some of those was from just for a quick statement, me shooting through that thought.
My fear was that my fear was that you may have been extending it, saying, "Well, Belichick made Tom Brady who he was." I was
Oh,
like, "Wait,
no,
what
no,
do you
no,
mean
no,
it
no,
was
no.
great?"
No, no. And so, like, I, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, like, I despised playing against Tom Brady and the Patriots. I despised it because it would be terrible every stinking time. And then when it actually looked like it went in the Steelers' favor, we're not going to argue about this, but the refs would be on their side. So let's move forward. But Jesse James caught the ball. But anyway,
No,
so with that,
you can't just slip that in, man.
Jesse James caught the ball. That's all I'm saying.
Go ahead, go ahead, go
The
ahead.
goal line was extended past the ball. What happens after that
It's
does
your
not matter.
show. I'm not going to argue it. It's your show. It's okay.
Maybe I want you to argue. No, I'm just kidding. About
Well,
necessary
that's a longer
things.
conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's gonna take up way too much time if we do. But Jesse James caught the ball. So,
No, we did not. But go ahead. Keep going.
oh man, I think that what we then saw begin to happen down there was we saw that culture on offense, but the thing that nobody wants to talk about, because let's be real, the news cycle, the thing that grabs the most attention and builds the most support and builds the most everything is Tom Brady, right? Tom Brady succeeded in this.
Yes.
And so when it came to the Buccaneers, I think nobody wants to talk about how insane that defense was.
No, that's true.
That
That is true.
defense is so good. Listen, offense scores points. Having a great quarterback helps you score points, but your defense wins championships.
Yeah, no, my fandom to Tom Brady is not blind. It's not to say that he makes this team. He's the one that he's the one that brings everybody to victory. You're absolutely right. There is a lot, and while he has nothing to do with the defense, right? There is a contribution that is being made in the team from all standards, from all players. The best thing to say is you're right. I mean, because it's not just Tom Brady that made this happen. There's the Patriots had an immaculate defense about mid-season, mid-career, mid Tom Brady's career, I should say. And you saw it, and they're the ones that actually made it happen. Brady was not doing good those years. In fact, he even admits the same thing. If you ever watched, so Disney Plus came out with not The Man, the Legend, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a 9-episode series documentary that follows Brady from game 1 of his career in game 11 of 2001 all the way through to 2021, I think it was. And it talks about here's my high points, here are my low points, and back about between 2010, 2012, give or take. I forget the actual years off the top of my head, but he was saying, I didn't win this. The defense did. The defense was the one that, and he gives full credit to. I mean, so even the characters right there, you're absolutely right. There were years that Brady did bad, and they still won because it had nothing to do with Brady.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would argue even back to like 2000, which years was it 2004 and such, that those early two Super Bowls. If you look, the defense performed highly, and Adam Vinatieri won the games. Adam Vinatieri and the defense.
Yes,
and
I know. So I was stationed in Korea, and it was 2006, and I was stationed in Korea, and it ticked me off because we had just traded Vinatieri off.
Oh yeah,
So,
I mean, arguably before Justin Tucker,
and then
right?
we lost
Arguably,
the Super Bowl to Vinatieri.
yeah.
So I get it.
So I mean, and that's some of the stuff. But again, that's not void of the reality that a quarterback and an offense is necessary in order to be able to get to that point. But as a Steelers fan this year, I can point out and tell you it doesn't matter how good your defense is if your offense doesn't freaking put points on the board.
It's true.
If your offense doesn't move the ball down the field. Oh,
but Vinatieri did not make a kick from a 0-0 scoreboard, right? So Brady had to at least keep up with the defense of the opposing team in order for Vinatieri to even have a chance to make a field goal. Because if it's a 3-point difference that it allows you to be able to win, if a 3-pointer is what's going to make a difference between a win or a loss, Brady had to have done something to get them to that point. Really, the offense in general, to get them to that point where Vinatieri would have had a chance to win the game for the team.
Not necessarily. And hear me on this. I say this from experiencing this even during this high school football season as a high school coach, because our defense many times had turnovers and scored points, and our offense didn't do squat, and we still won the game.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm not saying
That's good.
I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but I'm saying I remember the defense being really good and putting them in great and even some greats from the
Yep.
from the thousands and such. So that's
And
all
there
I'm
were
saying.
a lot.
Like
No, I do remember there were a lot of pick sixes in that season. So I get it.
yeah.
You're right.
So anyway, and that maybe some of this bias comes more nowadays from the fact that I've been coaching a lot of defense at it's at the high school level. I'm not trying to compare similarities between coaching at the high school level versus the
Mm.
NFL, but
Right.
my mind has become so much more aware and appreciative of defense. And so that other year, just a few years ago, with the Rams and the Patriots in the Super Bowl, everybody's just like, oh my goodness, this was such a terrible Super Bowl and stuff. Well, I mean, that was mainly argued because the Saints should have been in, right, because that no call in the NFC Championship game where the receiver got completely destroyed before the ball got caught between the Rams and the Saints.
Right. Yes. Yep.
And so, but anyway, I really appreciated that game and appreciate it more now thinking back to it because of how much it showed us about defense in the NFL. Yeah, it was only like what 13-10 or something, something like that, but we got to see defense matter again. And actually, if you
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at the statistics like over the past 2 years, but especially this year, we're seeing like the average offense has dropped a full touchdown scored on average per game because of
Really.
how much better defenses are doing. Like when you look at the average offense in the NFL and how much they're scoring per game, the point value is almost a full touchdown from 2 years ago.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
good.
So it
That's
is
really
good.
good.
It is good. And everybody wants to see points. And don't get me wrong, I love seeing great offensive plays. But come on, let's see some great defensive plays. And if we can't see them in the hit categories anymore because of the rules and the changes of player
I
safety and
know.
stuff,
Yeah.
now we're seeing heightened athleticism on defense that is completely that's why the edge rushers are so huge now, because the way in which they're doing things, not that they weren't before, but they were big before because they also had the hit aspect and the power aspect, and now there's such a movement and athleticism necessary off the edge, as well as you got to have 5 DBs who can play good ball because the athleticism of the guys on offense. So the game now, and that back to episode 12, top 5 reasons why the GOAT doesn't exist, is because one of the reasons that I had in that was because the game evolves. It evolves so much and has evolved so much. You can say this about any sport, and I do say this about every sport. And so when you look at what when you look at that as one of the things to take into account, as to why you can't just generally say that one person is the greatest of all time, it's because all time is to take every evolved aspect of the game and put it right side by side with each other, and you can't do that. You can't
Well,
necessarily do
no,
that.
no, and I highly disagree with that. So the GOAT term was first coined in 1992, and it was, in fact, I have it right here. It was first coined in 1992 when Lonnie Ali, Muhammad Ali's wife, incorporated Greatest of All Time Incorporated to consolidate her license and her husband's intellectual properties and commercial purposes. And if you know anything about Muhammad Ali, is he the greatest of all time? Would you consider him in boxing to be the greatest of all time?
I'm just gonna be straightforward with you. I don't know enough about boxing.
Oh, okay.
I
So
don't know enough about boxing.
So the reason why that it's considerable is because there's a lot of different variables you have to take into account. Number one is the season in which that particular player is playing, because they're dealing with a certain set of rules that other players today probably would not be playing with,
Mhm.
right? So boxing has changed, and boxing rules have changed, and so on. And just like football, the rules have changed. When Brady first came on, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about 12 games. Now it's what, 16? So there's a difference in game, the amount of games per season. There's, so obviously if he says, oh, there's most passing touchdowns in a season, yeah, but you have 4 extra games in your season that you can work with, right? So there are some changes in there. So when we say greatest of all time, in a lot of ways you have to say, okay, which year are you speaking of, right? Greatest of all time with the circumstances and variables that existed at the time that you were playing. So there are differences there. And then you also have to take into account, what position did you play? Are you the greatest of all time in that position, or greatest of all time football player in general? In which case, you're absolutely right. You can't make that statement because you didn't play DB. You didn't play cornerback. You didn't play, right? You're quarterback. You played a specific role, right? So you could say Jerry Rice might have been the greatest of all time wide receiver at the time that he played. But Tom Brady would have been the greatest of all time quarterback at the time that he played, right?
What I
It
absolutely
depends
love
on the variables you're including in the definition.
what I absolutely love is as you actually put logical like definition behind things, you're actually supporting my argument in that video. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
you
yeah.
think so?
Oh, I 100% because these are some of the things I argued. Is that like is if you actually contemplate what you're saying when you say the greatest of all time, it cannot be stated. But if you want greatest of their time, yes, and that's basically
I didn't.
that's basically what you
I
just
didn't.
said.
But no, that's not what I said. Because so in philosophy, you're looking at when you have a definition of a time. For instance, the word gentleman back in the day used to mean a man who owns land, right? Today, if you say gentleman, it simply means nice guy, right? So when I say
Well,
you're a gentleman,
that's debatable, but
well, fair enough. You can define how.
I
But the
know
point
that's
is,
not your point. That's not your point.
but the point is that gentleman no longer means a man who owns land, right? You
Mhm.
could be a scoundrel, a thief, a murderer, but if you own land, you're a gentleman, according to historical purposes, right? The etymology of the word. So when I say, well, you're a gentleman, I have to be very clear. What do you mean by gentleman? What form of definition are you using, right? And so when we say all time, well, that depends. You're a gentleman of all time. Well, again, but what do you mean by gentleman? You're a man who owns land, right? So when I say of all time, it's not saying that for all definitions that have existed throughout time, you are this person. It means of the definition that existed at that time, you are of all time that particular definition of whatever definition we're using of GOAT. So in this case, GOAT of, let's say, 2001, 12 games in a season. The first, you came in game 11 and you saw a huge difference in the way that the team played. As an example, you can bring up the fact that he has, more Super Bowl rings than the Steelers team, right? And you could call
As
no,
many.
hold on, wait.
As many.
No.
He has 6.
Steelers, hold on, wait. I looked this up. Hold on, wait.
The Steelers have 6. We were the first team to have 6.
Right?
Brady didn't get 7, did he?
I know people are probably laughing. He's like, he's a Tom Brady fan. He should know this.
But now I'm second guessing myself. I know the Steelers have 6.
Yeah, I
I know
know.
that for sure. But I just can't remember. Does Brady have 7 now?
There it is. I thought it was 7.
I thought it was
7.
Oh, and he does have 7.
Yeah, geez. You got me questioning for a
Okay.
minute. I was like, wait, I know this.
Okay. It was
he has more Super Bowl.
He has 6 with the Patriots.
Yeah, 6 with the Patriots,
Okay,
but then 1
okay.
with the Bucs. But yeah, so he has more Super Bowl rings than any NFL team
Mhm.
already, automatically, and that doesn't matter how many games are in a season. By the way, already that's a big difference. And so you can say as an example, okay, well, something's different with that. Was he a part of the right teams at the right time? I'm sure somebody like you might claim that, but then we go back to what did he do in order for that to happen? I mean, he's a pretty central part of the team to be a quarterback. So it goes back to how are you defining the term? And if you apply that term across the board, does he still end up becoming the top of that list? If so, it doesn't matter who it is, by the way, then I would say, yeah, you're a GOAT. Muhammad Ali, you're the GOAT for the definition and the circumstances and variables that existed at your time. If you applied that across the board, there's nobody like you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Right.
and again, you believe it or not, you are supporting what I had said in that. And so
Not at all.
no. Listen to me. So, I had emphasized in that the public, if you were to say to the general public the word
Oh, in your
GOAT,
article?
you were to say the
Yeah.
word GOAT, what do people think of? Literally the greatest player in football of all time. When somebody says Tom Brady's the GOAT, that's what the general public thinks of. If you were to sit and define terms and stuff, I agree with you 100%. And that's what I say. And the thing is if you were to take it, if you were to take it and you were to say the greatest quarterback of his time means the GOAT, then yes, Tom Brady is that because he is the greatest player. He is the greatest quarterback of his time. You're defining certain things that give feasibility to the actual terms. Whereas, so we were saying the same thing.
We're not, but your
Similar
logical
thing.
conclusion.
I'll say it like that.
But your conclusion, according to what you said, was that he's not the GOAT, therefore. And I'm saying, well, no, he still is the GOAT, based on the definition that we're portraying. We agree with the methodology gets to our conclusion that. And I concede that point. You're absolutely right. We concede that there's no GOAT in the way that society is defining GOAT.
And
Right? There's no such thing as a football of
that's
all
the
time.
focus of that episode.
And if that's the case, then so be it. But to conclude also that there is no GOAT, right, is just as fallacious.
See,
Right?
I disagree, and hear me
It
out on
depends
this.
on how you find it.
Hear me out on this, because one of the things I emphasize in that video too is you have to define what you mean by success, because to state that somebody is the greatest of all time means that we have a similar understanding of what is success. So you already said that you pointed out the fact of 7 rings. Well, why do rings define? Because if you're looking at an individual in a team game, you have to look at far more than how many rings they have. You have to look at what they're able to apply, because if you look at the capability of a certain player, for example, Dan Marino could be argued as the greatest quarterback of all time because of what he was able to do. But if you were to say to the general public, and you have to remember too that a lot of my conversation with this is to general football fans, right? Like when you say the word GOAT, what comes to your mind, and then addressing that. It's not necessarily let's define down exactly what this would look like. But with the Dan Marino piece, if I were to claim and really look at the pieces of, you have to define what you mean by success and what you're able to, okay, so what is that player able to actually achieve in the time that they play? Dan Marino should be in the conversation of greatest all time, but instantly people would smack me across the face because Dan Marino never won any Super Bowls. I don't care. Still, what he was able to achieve as a quarterback in the time that he played with the players that he had around him on the team, and the injuries that were suffered. And you could go into any detail about this. You could go into every little detail if you wanted to, which we can't. And one of the things I concede in that is I was not alive when well, I can't say that because I was at the tail end, but you have this generalized understanding of when I say GOAT, yes, what you said about 1992, Muhammad Ali, the thing about the meaning behind GOAT, I would agree with, okay, that gives me comprehension as to what that term means. But what you said earlier about etymology, it is 20 years, no, it is 30 years later. It is 30 years later. So now when you say GOAT, that's not what people think about. When you say GOAT, people think literally this player right here, he is the greatest person to play football. And what is the reasoning? The number one reasoning is because he has 7 rings. And it's just like, but I'm saying generality.
Generally,
People throw comments at me on Twitter, like DM me. I want to hear more from other people like this. I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but I'm just sharing from my experience, from listening to sports shows, from listening to other people's conversations across different states lines, not just, here in my little town, but people when they talk about Tom Brady as the GOAT, they literally mean he is the greatest. You could put him in any time of any era, and he would be the greatest quarterback of all time. And that's not true. That's not true.
What you just did though was that you diminished your own platform. So you started getting into the philosophical conversation about what success is, right? And by doing so, you actually made an existential argument that diminished even success existing. So the moment you said, well, it depends on how you define success. Why should 7 Super Bowl rings define success? Why should the many different records that he's broken? How should that define success? Excuse me. So when you diminish the qualities that are taken in order to define success, so that there's no qualities anyone could really agree upon, right? So that then, technically speaking, objectively speaking, there would be no such thing as success. A team losing a game would be just as successful to one person as one person winning 7 Super Bowl rings. In which case, why even talk about football in the first place? Because what you just did was you just destroyed the entire argument of even discussing this in the first place. There's no such thing as success. And now we entered into an existential argument, which was not the point of this conversation. The point was, how is each individual defining GOAT? Because that will determine the success, I'll put the word success, of a conversation to be had.
I don't believe I did take away the meaning of success. What I said was that the reason that people give for what success is, what people define as success today, is not what success is. Success, I did say that success is what a player was able to do at their position in their time. So I didn't say that success didn't exist. I didn't diminish the fact that success existed. What I did say is that what people understand as success is not what the proper understanding of success is when we're talking about
Right.
somebody being the greatest at what they do.
No, when I said that you said that
Especially when
there's
we're
no
talking,
success,
well,
it's the
especially,
logical conclusion. If there's no definition for what success should be except for a subjective definition, well, everyone's going to have a different subjective definition of what it is. I mean, objectively, that means that there's no such thing as success. It's all subjectively defined.
I,
Is
I,
that true?
I would agree in the case that everybody, if people defined success as a subjective thing according to what they own think, according to what they think, yes, that can't hold, because then there's no objective understanding of success. What I'm saying is the objective understanding success is what the individual performs and does to in their time with their team for their position. That is what shows us what success is. When somebody sets records that holds place for 30 years in a time when they didn't throw the ball the same way, when they didn't do the things the same way, that to me shows success of a player in that position. When somebody does the same level of things or just barely beats it, when they've been doing, you said 12 to 16 games and they've had so much more, all those kind of things, like, it doesn't mean that they're not a bad player. It doesn't mean that they're not successful, but they were not as successful as that other player when you consider their time, so that's what I'm saying. I'm showing what I believe is the objective understanding of success. And what we have
But you subjectively defined it.
it's not based upon how I feel. Like, it's not based upon what I objectively, when you look at how somebody performs in
Right.
their position and what they achieve with specifics to that position and how that affects the team, that defines how they are successful.
But you subjectively define that. What if I said I disagree? And I say success is not built upon that at all. I think success is different.
What does that
This is a longer conversation.
Well, yeah, but I don't see how that would change what is actually true. It's just
Right,
your
but
opinion that what is true is wrong.
Right, but why would your opinion be more elevated? Why should it be more promoted than my opinion?
Well, because
This is a longer conversation.
Well, no, because if you define success, that's what I mean. If you define success, that's what I'm going off of like success. If you look, why did it do Succession? That's different. That's a different thing.
That's a different topic.
We're not talking about Mac Jones. Anyway, the
Nice segue.
The good. I mean, there's a couple, and we don't have time to look at the history behind those.
No, we don't. We don't because well, it's interesting because it's part of the topic that you wanted to discuss anyway. But when it comes to success, I mean, is having a family, does that mean you're successful? Having a job, does that mean you're successful? Having a certain amount of money, does that mean you're successful? Right?
Well, I think
being able to acclimate to your surroundings, is that successful? Right?
They're dependent upon the topic and the subject of which you're looking for success. So for me to say, for us to be talking about football and then to say, like, is the fact that this player is married mean that they're successful? Well, that has no bearings on the success of being a football player.
Right. But do you see how quickly it was easy to say, well, success should be defined as, and you fill in the blank of whatever quality that might be. So I could be successful if I lose a game because my intent, just placating here for a minute, if I know a player on the other side is dealing with some issues and he really needs this win to be encouraged, and I throw the game, I'm not saying this ever happened in the NFL. I'm saying, but if I throw the game for the other person, am I being successful from a character perspective?
We're not talking about character. We're talking about football.
Right, but the point is that the success is defined differently depending on who you're talking to. Like, for instance, someone could say, I think it's successful that you're on a team that you contributed to the fact that now your team made 7 Super Bowls. That's awesome. That's a big deal. No other player rather has ever done that. So that's something that sets you apart from everybody else. That could be a definition, a quality that somebody might use as defining. That's one of the reasons why now if they say that that's the only reason why he's the GOAT, I probably would take issue with that. But if that was one of the reasons, yeah, that's a viable reason why somebody should be considered a GOAT.
I think it's a viable I think it's a viable reason why somebody can be considered successful.
Okay. So then, yeah, so it's terminology then. Okay.
There's a part that we're not like, I think I'm trying to communicate that I don't think you're grasping, or that you're trying to communicate that I'm not grasping, and I think we're gonna end up continuing to beat a dead horse.
This is why we're friends, man.
Yeah, because I mean, to end my thought with that, just so we can
Yeah,
make
yeah, go
sure
ahead.
that we cover some other conversation pieces, but is for me, when you look at any individual topic and such, I think the idea of success is an objective thing, in the way of success is it's the attempt to achieve. And specifically, when we're talking about success in in the topic of being a GOAT in football, being the greatest of all time in football, in my thought, and in what you defined for yourself as well, the greatest player of their position in their time, right? Being the definition of GOAT. Then what you're looking at for success is the attempt or achievement, the aim or attempt to achieve the highest of opportunity, the highest of levels, the highest of, I don't want to use
Mhm.
achievement again, but within what you are doing specific to that. So your character in that situation is not a part of that success. Like
No, it's not. I agree.
you can be the most immoral person, but still be the greatest football player of your position of your time. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you could still be an Ndamukong Suh and be a dominant defensive lineman, but still be a piece of trash. Like, it's
right.
just so that's what I'm saying. Like, for me, I'm looking at black and white, like, this is the tunnel vision of understanding success, and that is an objective thing that you can use across any subjective topic,
Yeah,
anything you want. I think that's what
yeah.
I'm trying to
And
portray.
I agree with that. But and I totally agree with that definition. My only stipulation was that the end of that tunnel, the destination that each person tries to achieve, each person is going towards, that destination is different for every person,
Hmm.
right? And so therefore there's no subjective definition of success. Even though I agree with the tunnel vision idea that you presented. That totally makes sense. Success is being able to achieve whatever end you're trying to achieve. But whatever you're trying to achieve is going to be different for each person, and that's where it becomes slippery to be able to
Well,
define.
and I think that's part of my argument in that video, is understanding that there are, like, when you look at the end of the tunnel, it's not just whatever I choose or you think
Yeah,
or whatever. It's
yeah,
literally
yeah,
based
yeah.
upon, no, as a quarterback, if I'm going to be the greatest quarterback of all time, or of my time, and therefore fulfill this idea of being the GOAT, I was able to do the most and complete the most as this position. Well, it has to be
Right.
pertinent to that position. It has to do
Agreed.
with how smart I was, how I led, how many, what my completions, how much yardage I gained, how many touchdowns, what I was able to do, all those things. Having a ring comes into that play, but I don't think it eliminates and discounts what somebody else was able to do with those other things. And so that's what I'm saying, is, like, specific to the position, there's obvious markers of what it looks
Hmm.
like to be a good quarterback. That's what I'm
Hmm.
looking to.
I
And
absolutely agree.
and so
And you
what
actually
I'm
made my argument for me.
and I guess what I'm trying to do consistently in this, when people
Yep.
talk about this, is get them to think, like, stop thinking about what you feel about this guy and, like, oh my goodness, he was able to do this.
Agreed.
Okay, that's cool, he was able to do that, but think about the details of this, and nobody thinks that way. Nobody thinks that way. And
No, no, no. I agree.
I
I
say that
absolutely
because
agree.
to get people to actually think through an itemized list of understanding and comprehending why a certain player, or what you're actually arguing when you say GOAT versus when I say GOAT, and what you're actually meaning by the success of a certain player and stuff like that. Like, that's too much headspace for a lot of people. And I
Yes.
get that, and I have to
Too
constantly,
much
like,
to do. Fair enough.
but for people to flippantly then be like, oh, he's the GOAT, it's just like, do you even understand what you're saying? Do you
That's
comprehend?
fair.
Do you
If you want to
comprehend?
send me that link to the article, and I'll read it after this is over.
Huh. Oh, it was,
I haven't read it.
what article are you talking about?
The article you talked about with week 12, I think it was
No, 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 no.
about.
I'm talking about a previous episode that I recorded, talking about the
Oh,
top 5 reasons. It's like episode 12 of the podcast, episode 13,
okay.
something like
Yeah,
that.
I'll look at it.
Okay. So, I don't remember a lot of it. It was one of those ones that I kind of rambled about it, because I've talked about it a lot, and I kind of just threw it out there, and I was just like, wow, this kind of falls into place of just basically five. I don't say number one, this, number two, this, but you can hear as you go through, like, oh wow, there's
Yeah.
like 5 main things that point out and stuff like
Okay.
that. So
Yeah.
anyway, I didn't get into it as philosophically as we just did. because I don't think that's what the general public does.
No, I agree.
And
And I
so.
apologize. It
And
probably went too
no,
deep.
no, 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 no. I enjoy it, and I think part of anybody listening to a podcast is knowing that, if they listened and heard not despise, but if they heard that I was like, I hate that I'm doing this episode right now. If they heard that in my voice, I don't think that, I think part of the reason people listen to different episodes is because they can tell that somebody genuinely enjoys what they're doing and talking about. And that's,
Right.
like, and for me, like, sometimes it's just like, I know what I want to say. I know what I'm thinking, but I may not be able to clearly get it out. And sometimes I enter this
Yeah.
place of like the 70-year-old who told the same story all their life and is forgetting pieces and just getting angry because they know the story, but they can't communicate it. That's how I feel when I get these certain thoughts. And it's just like, okay, no, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. And no, that's not what I meant. Like, how do I get this out? So that's where I find myself, and so that's why I appreciate conversations with yourself, because I know that how you process through and think through, it helps me to realize, well, no, okay, yes, like I agree that, but I want you to understand what I was trying to say because I didn't communicate it right,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It helps me to better verbalize and
So
actually
in,
communicate
in
certain
your
things.
defense, that was a part of the topic that was not really prepped for on either side. So I
That's very
totally
true.
get it.
No, that's very true. Maybe a lot of that'll be bonus stuff. I don't know, but but I should probably check right now. Are you still good with a
I'm
little
still
bit of
good.
time? Okay, all right. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure because we spent a lot of time on that, and I'm happy we
Yeah,
did
we
this
did. We did.
because instead of me having a 20-minute episode, it was only like a 20-minute episode, like episode 12, so it's also short listening. But
Oh,
but instead of it just being me on the mic talking about my thoughts, it's nice to be able to get feedback and thought back. Like, no, I disagree with that. I would have did. Oh well, what about this? And well, no, this is what I meant. And it's nice. It's really nice.
no, I really do appreciate those. I say the word conflict. That's probably too strong of a word, but in definition, I like those kinds of conflict because there's an old Sun Tzu quote. You don't know your enemy until you fight them,
Mm.
right? And so there's and not that you're an enemy, but that the point is that you really get to know somebody in conflict, right? You get to know them because anyone puts a face out, but in conflict you get to be able to see what are your true intentions, what are your true behavior and mannerisms, and, and what are your true beliefs, what are your true desires, right? And it allows you to get closer, and then in the conflict, if you do it right, it actually presents a safety like
Mm.
what we just did today, just now. It presents a safety that, yeah, you know what? I can be vulnerable. I can be raw. And here's who I truly, and it actually, I think it grows that friendship in ways that I really don't think that we're seeing today often.
Mm.
So I appreciate conversations like that with you as well.
No, because I can hit this little red button right here on my screen, instead of actually having difficult conversation, right? Uh, all
Right,
right. Well, that
right,
was enough of him today. No,
right.
but
Never inviting him back.
yeah. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation that has taken place so far. If you have, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a rating, review, 5-star, share, retweet, whatever it is. It is helpful to being able to get this out to others, to be able to hear it, to participate in the conversation and in what's going on. Let me know what your thoughts are, not only about the conversation, but what are your thoughts about what does it mean? What should you think of? All those things when you're talking about the GOAT. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. There's more to this conversation that will be coming out in the next episode of Cleats Off the Couch, as well as a full conversation that will be available to patrons. If you're interested in that, please check out the Patreon in the descriptions of the videos and in the links of the podcast episodes. I had the great privilege yet again to be able to take conversations from the couch, starting with football, and to move into life. And you get to hear more about that in the next episode of Cleats Off the Couch. And until then, this is Delcary reminding you to keep your cleats off the couch. Peace.